Starting with Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. But it is appropriate, even though we said this Rashi yesterday, it's appropriate to repeat it, the first Rashi on the Torah, because Rashi, writing in medieval France, understood what was going to be facing the Jewish people throughout history. And Rashi begins his whole commentary not by quoting Midrash or Gemara, which he quotes 90% of the time, and not by commenting on a textual, something off in the text, but by asking a methodological question and by quoting a medieval authority, most likely his father. Because Rashi's name was Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, and so he starts by quoting a Rebbe Yitzchak. This Rebbe Yitzchak is not cited in the Talmud, so it's most likely his father. And the question is haunting. Amar Rebbe Yitzchak. So Rashi starts by quoting his father, the first one ever to study with Rashi. He starts by saying the Torah should have started with the first mitzvah. Mitzvah Rishona. Why does the Torah start with Bereishit? It should have started with the first mitzvah. Shenitztavu by Yisrael. Matam Pasach Bereishit. Why does the Torah start with Bereishit? Mishum Koach Maasav Higid La'ano. He wanted to tell the Jewish people about his power. He says, it's in my power to give you the land of the nations. That if the nations of the world should say to the Jews, Listim atem, you're colonizers, you stole the land from us. You're robbers, shekavashtem arzo shivagayim. You stole the land from the seven nations. You have no rights to it. Hemo rimlahem, the Bnei Israel to respond, the whole land doesn't belong to you, it belongs to God. God created it and he gave it to the one who he wants. God has the right to give it to them, and then God has the right to take it from them and give it to us. Rashi decides that this is the best way to open this work. And it's very clear that Rashi understood, writing in a little street in a city of Troyes, which maybe had 300-400 people. Rashi never went anywhere near the land of Israel. But he knew that one day the Jewish people would be returning to the land. And when it was their time, the nations of the world would say, you're colonizers, you're stealing our land. And Rashi says, this is the way we start the Torah. Jerry, you had a question.
Yes. The Torah opens up not with God speaking to the Jewish people saying, this land is your land. He starts out with Adam and Eve and saying, these nondescript human beings are the possessors of the earth, and they have to take care of it. So
right. That's why it makes Rashi's comment even more astonishing. It's a deviation from the literal shot. It's almost not even in the context. Who's talking about it? But Rashi feels the need, with his opening Rashi, to deviate from his standard approach and to make this methodological point as to why the Torah doesn't start with the first mitzvah, in order to emphasize that the whole world belongs to God, and therefore it's God who assigns the land and who gave the land to the Jewish people. Yes, exactly the point. That Rashi has to make this point, even though it's not connected to the Pshat. And Rashi says later on in the book of Bereishit, I've only come to explain the Pshat.
He wrote the commentary on the Torah before he wrote the Talmud.
On what basis do you say that?
I don't know, yes.
No, he never. We don't know when he wrote the Torah commentary, when he wrote the Talmud commentary. But it's likely that he wrote them almost at the same time.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. I haven't seen a hint. Also, he wrote the Talmud commentary at different times because in a few places it says in his commentary on Talmud, here Rashi put down his pen and died. So Rashi dies in several places in the Talmud, and he didn't. So it means that he was working on it. It was a work in progress. Where he didn't die while he was writing the Chumash commentary.
Suggests that he certainly finished it before he finished.
Yeah, the Talmud commentary was probably multiple drafts because he also doesn't have the same. He sometimes contradicts himself. So then we did the next Rashi yesterday, but we'll just jump till the next verse. Bara Elokim, the next Rashi. Bara Elokim. Why does it say Bereishit bara Elokim in the beginning of God's creating? Why does it say God's creating? Lo nemar bara Hashem. Why is Rashi saying, does it say Elokim versus the Yud K Vav K, which is the name of Hashem? Rashi says, Lo nemar bara Hashem, shebetzvila ala b'machshava, v'vroto b'midas adin, v'ra'ah she'en or miskayim hiktim midas harachamim, v'shitfalo midas adin. Ma'inu dochsov b'yom asos Hashem Elokim eretz v'shamayim. So let me explain. The word Elokim, the name of God, there's multiple names of God that are used in the Torah. Here, the Torah starts with the name of God that's called Elokim. And there's also a name of God that's called Hashem, which is the four-letter name of God. Now, those who are not from the rabbinic tradition will say, oh, that means that there were two authors of the Torah. One is the author called the E, and one is the author called the J, and that's why there are two different names of God. But Rashi clearly rejects that approach, and every single question that the biblical critics have, Rashi anticipates most of them. And Rashi, right at the beginning, tells us why there are different names of God. One is the God of judgment, that's Elokim, and one is the God of mercy, that's Yud K Vav K. And Rashi says that at first God said, I'm going to create the world just using the attribute of judgment. But then he saw that the world wouldn't last. And so therefore, he brought about the attribute of mercy and gave it precedence. And he joined it to the attribute of justice. And that's why it says, on the day Hashem Elokim Eretz V'Shamayim. On the day Hashem, God, made the land and the heavens. So later on in the second story of the creation, which is in chapter 2, again, the biblical critics will argue that this means that there's two different versions by two different authors. Rashi is explaining why there's two different versions, because God first intended to create it through judgment, and then he said we need to have mercy before judgment. That's Rashi's explanation. Okay, and now verse 2. V'haaretz. So it says the land was tovavo, v'choshech al panei tehom. The land was tovavo, and it was dark on the face of the Tehom. V'ruach Elokim mirachefes al panei hamayim. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. Rashi says, the land was tohu vavo. What does tohu vavo mean? I think that's even an English word today. Yeah, look it up. Tohu vavo. I think it's an English word. Somebody told me, they sent me word of the day. Tohu vavo. Did you ever see that, Mordechai?
Means chaos.
What?
Means
I mean-
chaos?
Yeah. Because that comes, the reason why he sent it to me, because the question was, my mother-in-law asked this question, in the 10 martyrs, did I tell you the question? Did I tell it to you, Sam? I did, so maybe I'll just repeat it anyway, because I'm so proud of my mother-in-law, so I'll say it again. She said, why does God say to the martyrs, to the angels who are complaining about the martyrs, quiet or I'll return the world to water and to tohu vavohu, which makes it sound like God is going to bring a flood upon the earth. No, we know that God promised he would never bring a flood. So I asked my friend, and he sent me word of the day, tohu vavohu.
So the Wikipedia, it's biblical Hebrew.
All right, well, fair enough. It is biblical Hebrew.
Right.
What about the dictionary? Can you look up dictionary.com? So anyway, tohu vavohu, my dear friend, Yonatan. So good to see you. We're studying here. Take that book right here, right in front of you. We're in Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. The earth was tohu vavohu. Rashi says tohu lashon tema, astonishment, vishimamon, bafflement, sha'adam toheh mishtomeim al bo sheba, that a person is astonished and baffled over the void within it. Chapter 2, verse 2 in Genesis, right? The very, very beginning. We're starting over. So there was an astonishment over the void within the world. Chapter 1, verse 2. Rashi says, Tohu in French. Anybody here know French? Sam? In French, it's estortissant or étourdissant. You know what that means in modern French? Étourdissant. Astounding, staggering, stunning, astounding. Étourdissant. Maybe I'm pronouncing it. Yes, Jerry.
Apparently, Rashi anticipated that in the 20th century, we would discover that the universe is very empty between what we call our system, the solar system, between various solar systems, big, long miles of emptiness.
Yeah, that's what he says here. Correct.
He anticipated this.
He understood it. Yeah. And that very nice. So then Rashi says, Vohu, Rashi says, means reikus, emptiness, utsadu, desolation, meaning like a black hole. I don't know who I'm sharing my password with, but okay. I'm sorry. Nothing. So, al panei tahom, al panei amayim sha'aretz. So there was tohu vavohu on the face of the tahom, on the face of the water that was on the face of the earth. So when did God create water? When God created the heavens and the earth, it was made out of water. V'ruach Elokim mirachafes, and the Spirit of God was hovering. Oh wait, we have to go back, and Rashi will explain it to us, because you want to know where did the water come from. Go back a little bit to the first Rashi, which I skipped with you. Vim Tomar, Rashi says, if you will say that the phrase Bereishit bara Elokim comes to tell us she'elu tchila nivra'u, Bereishit hakol bara li'elu, that these, i.e. the heavens and earth, were created first. And it means at the beginning of everything, God created the heavens and the earth. V'yesh lecha mikraot shemekatrim l'shanam. There are other verses which are abbreviated. If this would be the case, Tamal Atzmacha, you have a question. Sharamayim Kanmu. Because the waters preceded the heavens and the earth, as it states. The Spirit of God was hovering over the water. So Rashi says the waters came first. Where were the waters were created? So Rashi is saying, how could the water have been there if the heavens and the earth were created, and never says the waters were created? This teaches us that the waters preceded the earth. So before the heaven and the earth were created, before the heaven and earth were created, there was water. Before the heaven and earth were created, God created the waters. That's what it's telling us. And furthermore, Shashamayim, and this is very significant, Me'eshu Mayim Nivra'u. The heaven was created from the water and the fire. What do you think that means, that heaven was created from fire and water? So Rashi is telling us the order in which it says things were created in the Torah is not the actual order. Not the actual order. Because the water came first. Water came before the earth and before the heavens. So if somebody would ask you the question, what was created first? Don't say the heaven and the earth. Because we know water was created before it. Because it says the water was hovering over the earth. And also the heaven was created from fire and water. So also fire came before the heavens and the earth. Yes, Jerry.
The planet Saturn has rings of ice surrounding it. That same idea apparently exists with the planet Saturn.
There are some approaches to this first chapter of Bereishit that try to dovetail the whole creation story with modern science. There are some approaches. There is a famous, I don't know if he's still alive, physicist from Bar Ilan. His name was Schroeder. And he wrote a whole book, Genesis and the Big Bang, where he tried to synthesize the two texts. But it works in some areas, but not in others. So, okay. All right, now we're up to verse V'ruach Elokim merachafet. The Spirit of God was hovering above the water. What does that mean? That's in verse 2. What does it mean the Spirit of God was hovering, or the breath of God? Rashi says this refers to the throne of the glory. The Kisei HaKavod, Omeid Ba'avir, was standing in the air, and it was hovering over the surface of the water. With the spirit of the breath of the mouth of God, and by his statement, like a dove was hovering over a nest. Okay, I'm going to ask, who can explain to me what this means? The throne of the glory was standing in the air and hovering over the surface of the water. What does that mean? That's why the Talmud says that you're not allowed to teach Rashi Bereishit in a large group like this setting. Talmud says it's actually prohibited. We're not really teaching it. We're just trying to read it with the Rashi. So I don't know, I don't really understand what I could translate the words. But here we have another French word. It's aso akoviter. You know that word? Coveter? It means to cover. Couvri. Make sense? Okay. Next verse. Vayomer Elokim Yehior Vayior. God said, let there be light. And there was light. Ironically, there's this verse, which to me is one of the most beautiful verses in the entire Torah, has no commentary on it by Rashi.
Is that the spirit of God hovering over? Is that like the cloud of God? Is that?
The cloud of glory. He says, no, it's like a dove that hovers over the nest. And so Rashi says refers to the throne of glory.
The dove hovering over the nest. It could be quite clear.
What does that mean?
The dove is what brings the eggs, makes the nest what it is. Hashem makes us, is the connection between us and the unknown.
Beautiful.
And then again, you have Hesed and Gilgal. I don't know if water is Hesed.
Well, okay, so it's tricky, but Deborah has offered an explanation, very, very sweet and beautiful one. We'll stop here, and God willing, tomorrow we'll go to verse 4. I also want to mention about tomorrow, in addition to